Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Brock for inviting me back. Last year I did a little impromptu talk. And I agree, Dr. Dan presented a lot of good information on problems that we see. And a lot of these problems we already know about, and we can get a kindred spirit in yes, I can relate to that problem. I can relate to that problem. And I agree with Dr. Dan on all the problems we've got. Okay, these are very real problems. We look at a constitution and we look at application and we see they don't mesh. And what I want to deal with here is the root cause. What caused this problem? I see America as a divided and a confused people. Dr. Dan talked about how many people have trust and faith in our education system that we were taught the truth about our own history. Okay, so we don't have trust in that. How many people look to the government and governing officials as being honest and integrity-filled people who are looking out for us and our best interest? How many people believe that's a new phenomenon? Because what I want everyone to look at is, let's look at the American Civil War. Do you think the American politicians were more benign and more just than they are today? How many people look at the American Civil War and see that there was a problem in that period of time frame? Because I'm here to say the American Civil War is the cause of what we have today. The problem is we have an education system that teaches that time frame, 1860 to 1868, and I know the war ended in 65, but it really went on to 1868. They want everyone to look at it from a moral perspective. Okay? It was to get rid of African bondage, get rid of slavery, right?
That was till 2 years after the war was already running.
It was, right. Okay, but we've got this, we're taught that the American Civil War is to only to be looked at from a moral perspective. I say what we've got to do, if we want our remedy, is to look at that war from a political perspective. What happened politically in that war? Because I say that war and the subsequent Reconstruction Acts combined together annulled the Constitution, annulled states' rights, and got rid of the foundation of this country. And all the problems we're seeing today are a result of that. Not the cause of our problems today. They're the result of the original overthrow. That time frame, 1860, 1861, was started by discontent of people in the American Union. Do we have discontent in the American Union today? Okay? They felt that the way to get rid of it was nullification, was secession, leaving the Union, getting out. Because they believed in the Declaration of Independence, the principles in the Declaration. The Declaration of Independence says that that all government right come from the consent of the governed, and the people have a right to alter or abolish that when it best suits them, especially when the government starts going in tyrannical directions. Okay? Let's look at just the most basic concept of the Civil War. South Carolina seceded in December of 1860 under James Buchanan when he was president. Abraham Lincoln isn't inaugurated until March the 4th. What's Abraham Lincoln's reasoning for this war? The southern states say we have a right to alter our form of government. All government of right comes from the consent of the governed. Abraham Lincoln says, no, it does not. His immediate response is, all government of right does not come from the consent of the people. You do not have a right to alter or change your form of government because you do not have permission from me. He's saying all government of right comes from the consent of the President of the United States and the United States Congress. Okay, is that about freeing slaves? No, that's about tyranny. Okay? So we've got this thing of, okay, so what's this war about? Abraham Lincoln did not believe in state sovereignty. What was the big conflict when this nation was founded? Excuse me. What was the big conflict when we went from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution? And that is, what is that form of government? What is that form of government? Are they creating a national government or are they creating a federal government? And to this day, most people see those two terms as synonymous. National government, federal government, synonymous terms. They were not originally synonymous. A national government is a nation of one people. A federal government is a union of states. And this concept of, do we have a federal government or a national government, was at everyone's heart. Are we going to losing all of our state sovereignty and going under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Congress? Because if so, we're not going to adopt this new Constitution. Well, that's what the Federalist Papers were about. You read the Federalist Papers, it's, okay, Madison, Jay, Hamilton. They're basically explaining that this form of government is a federal union with certain enumerated national authorizations to the Congress. Okay, Article 1, Section 8. Okay, those are its national powers. It's going to treaty as a nation. It's going to run the Army and the Navy as a body. We're going to have a common currency as one people. Okay, but then everything else is reserved to the states. It's actually said in the Federalist Papers that each state retains its sovereignty in adopting this Constitution. Each state retains its sovereignty. Well, we started out as a federal union. The Constitution is a federal form of government. It's a form of government that keeps state sovereignty. It is not designed to be a national government. If we go to Federalist Paper number 39, let's talk about citizenship. Because what I'm going to tell you is that what the American Civil War, through the Reconstruction Acts, did was nationalize citizenship. Okay? Remember the big debate? Are we a nation or a federal or a union of states? Okay, that's because our founders wanted a federal form of government, not a nation of one. Okay? James Madison said this in Federalist 39. The idea of a national government involves in it not only an authority over individual citizens, but an indefinite supremacy over all persons and things, so far as they are objects of lawful government. Among a people consolidated into one nation, this supremacy is completely vested in the national legislature, which is Congress. And then Madison goes on and says, in this relation, then, the proposed government cannot be deemed a national one, since its jurisdiction extends to certain enumerated objects only. Okay, what's Madison telling us? What would happen if you could nationalize citizenship? How much power would Washington, D.C. have, Congress have? Let me read this again. The idea of a national government involves in it not only an authority over the individual citizens. Do we feel we've got that problem in America today? The federal government have an indefinite supremacy over each and every one of us. They can tell us where to get health care, when to get health care, what we can do with our property, how much we're required to tell our masters how much money we make, who we give it to, how we spend it. Total subjugation. Okay? He says, among a people consolidated into one nation, this supremacy is completely vested in the national legislature, Congress. Where does he get that? Where does he get that from? Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Congress can pass exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over its domain. Because does North Carolina have a right to exercise jurisdiction over Congress's domain? No. Congress can pass exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over its domain. And if you get in their domain, then you fall outside of the Constitution. And he goes on and says, in this relation, then, the proposed government cannot be deemed a national one, since this jurisdiction extends to certain enumerated objects only. How many people believe the American Civil War was a crime? That the federal government had no authority to wage war to free people to make them free? I mean, it's universal. I can't find anyone. All we will find is the people that look at it from a moral perspective say, well, it may have been a crime, but the ends justify the means because we got rid of that evil institution of slavery. This is the answer you tend to get. Hang on, just lost me. Okay, the American Civil War. How many people have actually read the object of the American Civil War that passed Congress? Thank you. And there's several of us. The object of the American Civil War said this: And this was passed in Congress in July of 1861. He says, this war is not prosecuted on our part in any spirit of oppression, nor for any purpose of conquest or subjugation, nor for the purpose of overthrowing or interfering with the rights or established institutions of the states, but to preserve the Union with all the dignity, equality, and rights of the several states unimpaired, that as soon as these objects are accomplished, the war ought to cease. So what Congress said, the war is not for any purpose of conquest. Why can't it not be for any purpose of conquest? The only way you can have conquest would be if Congress recognized the southern states as a foreign nation. You can't conquer your own people, you can only conquer a foreign nation. They did not recognize the southern states' ordinances of secession as lawful, so you're not outside the Union. You're merely a state in rebellion to lawful authority. Okay? Were they states in rebellion to lawful authority? What right did Abraham Lincoln say? What crime did Abraham Lincoln violate when he said that these people are in rebellion to lawful authority, therefore I'm going to put the army down here and put down this rebellion? The Constitution says the United States Congress cannot pass any bills of attainder. And bills of attainder, like I said, the states cannot pass bills of attainder. It's one of the few that are in there twice. A bill of attainder is a big thing. What's a bill of attainder? A bill of attainder is something the Crown used to do where they would declare a group of people guilty of treason and punish them without due process of law. Okay? You're guilty of rebellion against lawful authority. Well, excuse me, don't we have a right to due process? Let's take that to court, Mr. Lincoln. Was any of this ever settled in court?
Not until after the war was over.
Okay, let me give you a couple quotes. Now, well actually, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go to, let's say the war is over. The war was over in 1865. North Carolina was considered in the Union in 1865. South Carolina, all the southern states were considered back in the Union because they were never recognized as leaving. They never left the Union according to the federal government. War is over in 65. North Carolina ratified or participated in ratifying the 13th Amendment in December of 1865. Is North Carolina considered in the American Union in 1865?
It was conditional
Yes.
upon ratification.
Not yet. That's 18. You're talking about 1867.
Yeah.
You're a couple years later. Okay, 1865, adopting the 13th Amendment. North Carolina is considered back in the Union. They are a state in the American Union. 1866, peace is declared by presidential proclamation. The war is over. Peace is declared. Okay, that's in April 1866. June of 1866, Congress proposes the 14th Amendment, which is going to nationalize citizenship. The southern states, all southern states, with the exception of Tennessee, voted against it. Most northern states voted against it. Some northern states voted for it, New Jersey and Ohio, and then once they realized what it was about, withdrew their consent, which is rarely ever happens in the amendment process. We withdraw. Okay? So you've got a lot of controversy about this 14th Amendment. It's proposed in June of 1866. They send the 14th Amendment to the states, and like I said, the states did not ratify it. So what did Congress do? On March 2nd, 1867, we got the founding documents of this country. Founding documents of this country. Most people think, well, that's a Declaration of Independence. Founding documents of this country is the first Reconstruction Act of March 2nd, 1867. It's reconstructing. It's getting rid of the old government. It's a revolution. It's a revolution. It's a major overthrow of everything we ever had. 1867. And Congress said, we believe we're going to pass these Reconstruction Acts based upon the principle the southern states are conquered territory. Okay? Well, what did they say the war was not for in 1861? Not for any purpose of conquest. The southern states are back in the Union in 1865, 1866. Peace is declared in 1866. 1867, Congress says we're changing the object of the war. It's for conquest. These states, we're going to reduce them to territories. They're not states anymore. North Carolina. North Carolina was annulled. You don't exist. And here's the only way you're going to get back into the Union. Is you're required to pass the 14th Amendment, nationalizing citizenship. Is that a free election? Is that how a free people change their form of government? This is the founding of this country that we're in today. If we're looking back to Patrick Henry, Thomas Jefferson, we're not looking back at our foundation. The foundation of this country is the reconstructed country put together by the 39th and 40th Congresses. Now, to prove that, let's go to some of the congressmen of the time. James G. Blaine. A lot of people talk about the 14th Amendment, and they say the 14th Amendment was designed to give blacks civil rights. 13th Amendment, nothing could be further from the truth. That's a modern myth. Okay? James G. Blaine, who was a sitting congressman, gave this speech. He was from Maine. You can remember him, Blaine from Maine. Gave this speech in Skowhegan, Maine on August 29th, 1866. Remember the war was, the 14th Amendment was proposed in June. So this is just 2 months after it's proposed. He says, and in making this extension, we are not confining the breadth and scope of our efforts to the Negro. It is for the white man as well. We intend to make citizenship national. A quote of a sitting United States Congressman, 1866. They intend to make citizenship national. Okay, James G. Blaine later became Secretary of State. He ran for president, his career politician, and when everything was said and done, he wrote his autobiography in a book called 20 Years of Congress. I got a copy of it right up here, an actual copy of it. 1861 to 1881. And in the section on the 14th Amendment and Reconstruction and all that, he says this: as the vicious theory of state rights have been constantly at enmity with the true spirit of nationality. Remember, state rights is a federal union of states, reserving states' rights. Nationality is a nation of one. He says, as the vicious theory of state rights have been constantly at enmity with the true spirit of nationality, the organic law of the Republic, that's the Constitution, should be so amended that no standing room for the heresy would be left. In other words, he's saying that we needed to amend the Constitution, and he's talking about the 14th Amendment, so there will be no standing room for the heresy of state rights. Okay? And he went on. He says the first section of the Constitutional Amendment, which includes these invaluable provisions, is in fact a new charter of liberty to the citizens of the United States, is the utter destruction of the pestilent heresy of state rights, which constantly menace the prosperity and even the existence of the Republic, and is the formal bestowment of nationality upon the wise federal system which was the outgrowth of our successful revolution against Great Britain. He's saying the purpose, the function of the 14th Amendment is not for the Negro, it's for the white man as well, it's to nationalize citizenship. But he goes on, and he's talking about, like in North Carolina. I told you North Carolina was annulled. In order to get back in the Union, they had to adopt the new Constitution and pass the 14th Amendment. He's talking about, in this part of the book, he's talking about this new state called, or these new constitutions created by Congress. He says, all were ordained in the spirit of liberty, all prohibited the existence of any form of slavery, and all heartily recognized the supreme sovereignty of the national government as having been indisputably established by the overthrow of the rebellion which was undertaken to confirm the adverse theory of state rights. And he wasn't done. He says this: its opening section, talking about the 14th Amendment, settled all conflicts and contradictions on this question by a comprehensive declaration which defined national citizenship and gave to it precedence of the citizenship of a state. National citizenship is over state citizenship. And he quotes from the 14th Amendment: all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside, And then he says this: these pregnant words distinctly reverse the origin and character of American citizenship. Instead of a man being a citizen of the United States because he was a citizen of one of the states, the way it was before, he is now made a citizen of any state in which he might choose to reside because he was antecedently a citizen of the United States. The consequences that flow from this radical change in the basis of citizenship are numerous and weighty. I agree with Mr. Blaine on that. Now, I've done a lot. I took 2 years off of work to research all this back in the mid-90s. I've been on this topic for 23 years. Okay? This isn't my first rodeo with the Patriot movement. The concepts are going out there. People who are unsettled. I've got a large education in virtually every movement out there. I know people in virtually every movement out there. The problem is no one recognizes the nationalization of citizenship. Because the political correctness associated with dealing with the 14th Amendment, giving blacks civil rights, virtually every group out there embraces the 14th Amendment as necessary and benign. It didn't do anything. So therefore, we've got to find remedy somewhere else. So immediately, as soon as you put the cap on where the problem lies and say, we're not looking there, at that point, you can never get remedy. We have to properly ascertain the problem that happened in America. We've got to properly look at this state of affairs in this country. A lot of people accuse me, John, you just go grab James G. Blaine. You know, anybody can go grab one person on one side of an argument and get quotes from them. And you're absolutely right. I can misquote the Bible, I can take scripture out, I can go grab authoritative senators and representatives on the greatness and the universal benefit of Obamacare, and I can grab people who are going to get quotes on the tyranny and vileness and the crippling of this country on Obamacare. So you're right, you can. So what I've done is I've grabbed some of my books I've done some research in. I just grabbed a couple of them to try to pound this out. This is American Constitutional Law by Martin Shapiro and Rocco Tressolini. This is like published in the 1970s, thereabouts. This is a section on the 14th Amendment. Chapter. It says the 14th Amendment defined citizenship, provided that no state was to abridge privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States, forbid states to deprive persons of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, and forbid the states to deny anyone equal protection of the law. Okay? Who has the authority to deny states from passing those laws? The federal government. They're now the supreme sovereign. They decide what happens in the states. He goes on. This is under the chapter of, or the heading of Early Judicial Construction of the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment was ratified in 1868 and was first interpreted by the Supreme Court in the slaughterhouse cases. Interestingly enough, the slaughterhouse cases had nothing to do with rights of Negroes. Okay? But what are we taught? The 14th Amendment is all about black civil rights. The very first case wasn't even about black civil rights. Okay? Let's go through some of the landmark Supreme Court cases that deal with the 14th Amendment, civil rights associated with the 14th Amendment. Juan Kim Ark, 1898. If you're born in the United States, you're a citizen of the United States. The foundation of anchor babies. Juan Kim Ark, based on the wording of the 14th Amendment. All persons born or naturalized in the United States. Stone versus Graham, I believe, was taking away the 10 Commandments. Violations of the 14th Amendment. Madeline Murray O'Hare, Murray versus Curlett, 1963, I believe. Taking prayer out of school. Violated the 14th Amendment. Roe versus Wade, saying that women have a right to abortion. Violated the 14th Amendment. Texas, I was going to say Texas versus White. Lawrence versus Texas. Lawrence versus Texas, 2001 case. sodomy laws, all sodomy laws saying that homosexuality is a crime, are hereby voided. They have equal right to act as everyone else. Violated the 14th Amendment. How many of those dealt with black civil rights? None of them. How much do those cases affect the problems we have here today? Huge. The moral destruction of this country, taking away of God in this country, all of it violates the 14th Amendment. Am I fighting the 14th Amendment? No. I'm fighting the Reconstruction Acts. Because the Reconstruction Act said you're required to pass the 14th Amendment. The courts have already ruled on the 14th Amendment. It's a political question. You cannot attack the 14th Amendment. You only can attack something that affects you. Okay, let's see. Let me keep reading this. It says the three key phrases of the amendment are, of course, extremely vague and ambiguous. There is much evidence to indicate that the authors of the 14th Amendment use these vague terms deliberately to ensure its approval. Certainly, the amendment's supporters sought to define United States citizenship authoritatively and to make the restrictions of the first 8 amendments applicable to the states. Prior to the 14th Amendment, the Bill of Rights didn't apply to the states. It applied to the federal government. Things it couldn't do. It says a fear on the part of the Reconstructionists that an amendment badly phrased to show these specific objects would not prove acceptable led to the use of vague and ambiguous phrases that it was hoped would accomplish the desired ends without too clearly indicating the purpose. American constitutional law, our foundation, was purposely vague to deceive the people. This is the origin and growth of the American Constitution, published in 1911 or 1912. 1911. Okay? Talking about the amendment, therefore placed the essential rights of life, liberty, and property in the several states of the Union under the ultimate protection of the national government. The national citizenship thus created as a substantive and independent thing was placed in Section 1 under the protection of a new Magna Carta. They're saying that the 14th Amendment is a new Magna Carta, a new set of rights for the American people. Enforceable by the federal courts, the first portion of which was manufactured out of ancient English material. Every citizen of the United States is now protected against unlawful state interference by the provision that no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States. Well, who defines privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States? Whose citizens are they? They're citizens of the federal government. When the federal government says gay rights are acceptable, gay marriage is acceptable, and those are rights of a United States citizen, what do the people of the states? What can you do? Look at it this way. Prior to the American Civil War, prior to this amendment, how much authority did the federal government have in the over the lives of the individual citizens of the states?
Functionally none.
Functionally none, unless you had a job that interacted with them, had to do with interstate commerce or international trade, something of that nature. But for the average person, zero. How much power do they have in our lives today? Virtually every single bit. How much evidence is there that we have where we have the rights put in place by our founders? I say none.
Bedrock of the Union's been reduced to a
Okay.
wisp of smoke.
So they say national citizenship is what was put in 1911. Over 100 years ago, they said the Constitution nationalized citizenship. James G. Blaine said that was the intent of it.
Yep.
Hang on. Oops, it just came out. Oops. That could have been a good quote, too. Uh-oh. Man, that might have been one of my strong ones.
To destroy things.
Okay. This section here talks a little bit about the original intent and what it evolved into. Oh, and what is the name of this book? This book is this is The American Commonwealth, published in 1912. And this is on the federal system. It says the contest in the Convention of 1787 over the framing of the Constitution and in the country over its adoption turned upon 2 points: the extent to which the several states should be recognized as independent and separate factors in the construction of the national government, and the quality and nature of the powers which should be withdrawn from the states to be vested in that government. So how much powers are the states giving up to the federal government? What's the extent of the powers of the states? He says, on the interpretation of these provisions, and this is in the same paragraph at the bottom, there has, however, been endless debate, some deeming the Constitution to have taken more from the states, some less, while still warmer controversies have raised as to the matters which the instrument does not expressly deal with, and particularly with whether the states retain their sovereignty, and with it the right of nullifying or refusing to be bound by certain acts of the national government. Okay, this is talking about nullification. And in the last resort, withdrawing from the Union. Of these latter questions, nullification and secession have now been settled by the Civil War. We may say that in the America of today, there exists a general agreement that every state, on entering the Union, finally renounced its sovereignty, and it is now forever subject to the federal authority as defined by the Constitution. This is what they're teaching in 1912, 100 years ago. A little bit later he says, the ground which we have tread during the remainder of the chapter is therefore no longer controversial ground, but that of well-established law and practice. The distribution of powers between the national and state governments is affected in 2 ways. Positively, by conferring certain powers on the national government. Negatively, by imposing certain restrictions on the states. And I'll just read this one last quote here about state sovereignty. It says, what state sovereignty means and includes was a question which increasingly engaged the most active legal and political minds of the nation from 1789 down to 1870. Reconstruction was passed 1868, or the new states, so right there at that time. Some thought it paramount to the rights of the Union. Some considered it to be held in suspense by the Constitution, but capable of reviving as soon as the state should desire to separate from the Union. Talking about the states had a right to secede. Some imagined that each state had, in accepting the Constitution, finally renounced its sovereignty, which thereafter existed only in the sense of such an undefined domestic, legislative, and administrative authority as had not been conferred upon Congress. The conflict of these views, which became acute in 1830 when South Carolina claimed the right to produced secession and the War of 1861 to 65. Since the defeat of the secessionists, the last of these views may be deemed to have been established, and the term state sovereignty is now but seldom heard. Even state rights have a different meaning from that which they had before the War of Secession. A state still possesses one important attribute of sovereignty: immunity from being sued by another state. Did things change with this war? We've got to look. Did a fundamental, foundational change occur, a political change in this country? Well, I'm just going to deal with North Carolina here. And I'm going to deal with the problem that we have today. This is North Carolina constitutional history put out by the Secretary of State. It just has the original North Carolina Constitution in it. Here's the confusion that we have. Dan, can I use that bottle for a prop? I got this analogy from my wife. There's a problem we have today. We've got a state called North Carolina that's in operation. We have a state called North Carolina that entered the American Union as a 12th state, one of the original states. We have a new state that entered the American Union June 25th, 1868, the one that's in operation today. I'm going to make the analogy of the original state, and we're going to say this is a bottle of Shout, which gets your clothes clean. I'm going to say this is the exact same bottle called Shout, but someone filled it with water. Okay? This Shout will clean your clothes, and you can spray it on, and there's all sorts of, we can read the Constitution of what it will do, what it won't do. This state's full, this bottle of Shout's full of water. Can it do the exact same? It's called Shout. Bottle's the same, says the exact same things. And what I'm saying, the inside of this is a citizenship. The state, the people. This group of people have a totally different set of rights than this group of people. Let's read a couple federal court cases on the 14th Amendment, just some little one-liners out of it. Elk versus Wilkins, 1884. It's quoting the 14th Amendment. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. And here's what the court said. The persons declared to be citizens are all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. The evident meaning of these last words is not merely subject in some respect or degree to the jurisdiction of the United States, but completely subject. The United States citizen is completely subject to the jurisdiction of Congress. Okay? Jones versus Timmer. This is just a federal court case. It says the Privileges and Immunities Clause of the 14th Amendment, U.S. citizenship status, protects very few rights because it neither incorporates the Bill of Rights nor protects all rights of individual citizens. Instead, this provision protects only those rights peculiar to being a citizen of the federal government. It does not protect those rights which relate to state citizenship. This analogy. The United States citizen has a set of rights. A state citizen has a separate, distinct set of rights. And one of my favorites is the U.S. versus Valentine. And it says the only absolute and unqualified right of a United States citizen is to residence within the territorial boundaries of the United States. Because all of your rights are subject to Congress. Now, can a state citizen say that? No. Now, the issue is what have you declared yourself to be? What did Congress do to North Carolina? I'm going to grab the Constitution of North Carolina, December 18th, 1776, and I'm going to read the preamble from the Declaration of Rights and the preamble from the Constitution. The preamble from the Declaration of Rights is one sentence. A Declaration of Rights made by the representatives of the freemen of the state of North Carolina. Who's it for? The freemen of the state of North Carolina. Now, what's going on at this time frame in American history? Are there two different body politics vying for control over who has jurisdiction over North Carolina? Yes. 1776, we got a war going on.
Yeah.
We got one group of people that, they're the loyalists. They're the Tories. We like the crown. So, is this form of government for every person that's in North Carolina? No, it's for the people that have an oath of allegiance to this state. In war, what's one of the big things you do when you capture what you suppose to be an enemy? Give us an oath of allegiance. You know, if you want to let them go. American Civil War. Can you remember the oaths of allegiance in the American Civil War? You get give an oath of allegiance to Washington. Deny your state. Okay? The Constitution of North Carolina preamble, the Constitution or form of government agreed to and resolved upon by the representatives of the freemen of the state of North Carolina, elected and chosen, blah, blah, blah. Constitution is for the freemen of North Carolina. Is it for the Tories? No. Is it for the Cherokee Indian? No. Is it for the foreigners floating through here? No. It's for the freemen of North Carolina. That's the body politic. What's the definition of a state? A state, by definition, is the people. a certain group of people, okay, organized under their laws of consent. All government of right comes from consent of the governed. The Constitution. The Constitution is the Constitution for the people, or the Constitution for the state. The state and the people are synonymous terms. And then they have a jurisdiction over a certain land mass. The people. Who are the people of the first state of North Carolina? The freemen of North Carolina. Let's go to the Constitution of 1868. Because we want to find out who could vote. Who's the body politic in the Constitution of 1868? Because I want you to see, is this the same group of people? Because a lot of people say what Reconstruction did was readmit the original state of North Carolina. I say it created a new state that's subject to Congress. As soon as I can get there. Article 6. Suffrage and eligibility of office. This is who can vote, who can participate, who's part of the body politic. Section 1. Every male person born in the United States and every male person who's been naturalized 21 years old or upward who shall have resided in this state 12 months. Is this the same state? Is this the same body politic as the freemen of North Carolina? Yeah. Is this a new state? Okay. I believe in nullification. I believe in nullification of the Reconstruction Acts, which put this state in place. The problem is we as a people have embraced and we love our oppressor. We love that state. We go to them. We ask them permission. I say they're nothing but usurpers. And to prove that, I brought some documents out of the North Carolina Archives. This document right here, stamped coming out of the North Carolina Archives. What is this? This is a military order sent from General Canby to Colonel Williams, the commandant in Raleigh, of the 2nd Military Post while North Carolina was reduced to a territory, putting in here General Order, Military Order number 120, issued by General Canby to remove the government of North Carolina under the Constitution of December 18, 1776. Here it is. This is the military order. Is that the way you change governments in a free society? Right behind it. What's this? When Colonel Williams went to Jonathan Worth, governor of North Carolina, he wrote this. This is the surrender letter of the state of North Carolina to the occupying military authority. Is this the way we change forms of government? What do you call it when you change a form of government, not by the consent of the people, but by military force? It's a coup d'etat. It's an internal coup d'etat. It's a military overthrow, not a change by the consent of the people. And that's what we're living under.
Which leaves you not with a republic, but a junta.
We don't have, how many people feel we have a republic? How many people feel it's gone? Okay? The issue is when did it leave? How did it leave? And can we prove it? Or, because what I see in this movement is, and what I'm trying to get people to come to consensus on, is what happened in this country? What's the one period of time that we can point to and say, this is the problem that we can all come together on? Because this is a legal argument. We can go into court with this argument if you have the right status. We can start presenting this to the American people to stand up on a right and just cause. Now, what is this? This is the Declaration of Reestablishment of the original state of North Carolina that we did in 1997. This is actually an original, signed by the people who said, we do not recognize. So this is the ultimate act of nullification. We do not recognize the Reconstruction Acts as being lawful and constitutional. We do not recognize the government they created as being founded by the consent of the people, we recognize the original state constitution of North Carolina, the original body politic. I do not give allegiance to your state. And we did this in 1997. And we've been going into court ever since. And we actually got it all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. This is the United States Supreme Court brief. We got it there in January of last year. Now, what do we do with all this information? Because I run across people all the time, John, I just can't agree with you. I don't think that's the problem. You know, it's really something else. I think you're really misinterpreting things. And I get people say, oh, what are you going to do? There's too big of a problem. You got too many people on welfare. What are people going to do when they don't get the check? What are you going to do? And in other words, I get a lot of people giving a reason not to look and delve into this argument. And I say that what we want to do, if we want to get this country back on a lawful foundation, and again, I appreciate Brock, I appreciate Dave, Dan, I appreciate everybody associated with this for allowing me to present this, because most people think this is way too extreme, too crazy, too far out there. We don't want to be associated with that. As soon as we're associated with that, then we're going to get discredited. We don't want that. Embrace the label, people. It's going to come if you're going to do something effective. The government does not mind people who complain. They don't mind people who get in large groups and rally and say, hey, we've got a solution, let's go over here. It's the Tea Party, it's the Republican Party, it's this, it's that. They don't mind that. What they mind is people who have the truth, who are armed with the truth of what happened and are willing to do something about it. What I say we need to do is put everything on the table. We have to properly ascertain what the problem is before we can even think about a solution. Otherwise, we're just being ineffective, giving them time to go by. Now, I'm going to end with this. And I want to see if we can see any correlation between what happened in 1775 and what the people were discussing then and what the people are discussing today. And I say our problems today are actually greater than what they had back then. And what I'm going to do is I took Patrick Henry's original speech and I adopted it to modern circumstances. I did not vary from the concepts at all, other than to plug in our problems versus their problems. It says, no one believes in true patriotism more than the people in this room, myself included. But different people often see the same subject in different lights. And therefore I hope it will not be considered disrespectful to those people by my presenting opinions opposite of theirs, freely and without reservation. This is no time for political correctness and niceties. The question before us concerns the calloused and unwavering path of destruction of our country. I consider it nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery. And as a consequence to the magnitude of the subject, there should be freedom of debate. It is only in this way that we can hope to arrive at the truth and fulfill the great responsibility which we have to God and our country. If I hold my opinions through fear of offending, I would consider myself guilty of treason towards my country and an act of disloyalty towards the majesty of heaven, which I revere above all earthly kings. It is natural for people to indulge in the illusions of hope. People tend to shut their eyes against painful truths. Are we included in the masses of people who have eyes and do not see, and have ears yet cannot hear the things which will truly save us from our present path of moral, fiscal, and political destruction? Should that be the direction of wise men engaged in the struggle for liberty? For me, whatever anxiety, pain, or fear it may cause, I'm willing to know the whole truth, to know the worst, and then provide for it. I have only one lamp to guide my feet, and that is the lamp of experience. I know of no way of judging the future except by the past. And judging by the past, I wish to know what conduct of the United States Congress The President and the Supreme Court for the last 60 years is there to justify the hopes of the American people that there is a good faith effort to return to and obey the United States Constitution. Is it the insidious smile and ever-changing promises of politicians? Stop trusting these deceiving promises. We cannot allow ourselves to be betrayed by promises from these political leaders any longer. Their promises are nothing more than the kiss of Judas. Let's look at their reactions to our protests and ask ourselves a few questions. They have created swarms of militaristic federal agencies and policies such as Homeland Patriot Act 1, Patriot Act 2, the Military Commissions Acts, the NDAA, the never-ending assault on the Second Amendment designed to disarm the American people, and the public notice given by President Obama that he has granted himself the authority to kill American citizens for the purpose of expediency rather than give them due process of law. Is this militaristic buildup necessary for a work of love and reconciliation and due process of law? Have we shown ourselves so unwilling to work with the federal government that force must be called in to win back our love and support? Let us not deceive ourselves. These domestic standing armies are the implements of war and subjugation, the last arguments to which dictators resort. I ask, what is the meaning of this domestic militaristic buildup if its purpose is not to force us into submission? Can we rationally assign any other possible motive for it? Does the United States have any domestic enemy so large to call for this massive militaristic accumulation? No, she doesn't. They're meant for us. They can be meant for no one else. They are created to bind and rivet upon us the chains which the United States government has been forging for the past 150 years. And what do we have to oppose them? Shall we try more public protests? Getting involved in political action committees? Voting? We've been trying these avenues decade after decade. We have held this subject up to every light that is capable, and remedy has proven to be in vain. Shall we try more desperate and more humble pleas? What path can we find which has not already been exhausted? Let us not deceive ourselves any longer. We have done everything that could be done inside their corrupted and usurped system. We've petitioned, we've remonstrated, we've supplicated, we have prostrated ourselves. Our petitions and demonstrations have been disregarded. We have been patronized and demonized. And all this, most patriotic Americans cling to the fond hope of a peaceful return to states' rights and a constitutionally limited federal government. What gives them this hope? Is there any longer room? Is there no longer any room for hope? If we wish to be free, if we mean to live in a land of law where the constitutions of the states and the federal government are adhered to, the federal government is truly limited, and we have true state rights, we must fight. I repeat it, we must fight. And appeal to law, truth, and to the God of hosts is all that is left to us. They tell us that we're weak, unable to cope with so formidable an adversary. But when will we be stronger? Will it be next week? Or next year? Will it be when we've been totally disarmed and when government cameras are placed on every street corner? Shall we gather strength by bickering and inaction? Shall we acquire the means of effectual resistance by lying supinely on our backs and hugging the delusive phantom of hope until our enemy shall have bound us hand and foot? We are not weak if we make proper use of the means which God has placed in our power. Hundreds of thousands of Americans, armed in the holy cause of liberty under God, with the true history of the criminal acts of the 36th through 40th United States Congresses, are invincible by any force which our enemy can send against us. Besides, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is a just God who presides over the destiny of nations and who will rise up, friends, to fight our battles for us. The battle, sir, is not for the strong alone. It is to the vigilant, the active, the brave. Besides, if we were shameful enough to desire it, it is now too late to retire from the contest. There is no retreat, but in submission and slavery. Our chains are forged. Their clanking can be heard in the halls of Congress, CBS, CNN, the New York Times, MSNBC. It is in vain to minimize the matter. People may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war of subjugating lawful American states is not something that might happen in the future. It is here now, and it is real. What benefit is there by standing idle? What is it that people wish? What do they want? Is life so dear or peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Any of that sound ring true to today? When are we going to be stronger, people? When are we going to come to consensus of what is wrong in America and what it takes? We got to quit saying we've got to go to these officials. These people who are supposed to be in charge of the truth are lying to us. We know they're lying to us. Who's the state?
We are.
The people are. Are these government officials the state? No, we are. Are they there to help us? What are we going to do about it? I got a lot more, but my time's up. Actually, probably up 10 minutes ago. But I appreciate all of you for listening to this. I've got a lot of information. I can take any question and answer anyone might have.